Welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU 2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
Is there, in fact, a war inside the walls of credit unions in regard to big data versus AI, or can the two flourish in harmony? On the show today are Legg, founder and CEO of Thrive 3.0, where the mantra is leveraging data to better members' lives, and also Saroop, Bharwani, co-founder and CEO of Senso, where he's been bringing AI to credit unions for several years. What you'll hear in this episode is that indeed big data and AI should coexist for optimal results in credit unions. Along the way, you will hear about successful AI implementations at a number of credit unions, from One Nevada to Suffolk Credit Union. You'll also hear how credit unions as small as $100 million in assets are successfully implementing AI and also big data strategies. Listen up. We're going to talk about big data versus AI, or are they friends?
Oh, goodness.
Because as I was thinking, I mean, Ann, your business has been big data, if you will.
Yep.
And if I'm a credit union guy, do I say, well, big data is dead. AI's devoured it.
Right.
And I think the answer to that is no. I think big data is food for AI. It's
let's kind of unpack that, and then if I may kind of lay the foundation, Saroop, and then if you can kind of take it from there. So the biggest thing we have to understand is what is AI, right? Okay, and we are talking specifically around generative AI and agentic AI, and to do any of the amazing things that happen that Saroop is doing with amazing credit unions, to do that, we have to be able to feed it. And that feeding has to come from data. And many times we think of data as being some sort of a zeros and one file or some sort of big, huge thing. We got to be in our brain, we got to rethink that and think about what is it. Let's go all the way back. What is the business problem I want to solve? What is my use case for using AI? And is it going to be, I have member experience, I have efficiency, I have productivity. It could be a bunch of these different things. Any one of those AI use cases or business problems I'm using AI is fueled by a beautiful source of data. Now, that data could come from the core. It come from many times, like when we think about trying to build out a knowledge base within the credit union, that our end users, our call centers our agents can be lovely with our members. We've got to build that on the material we have, which may be standard operating procedures, right? All of those beautiful job aids, all those beautiful things. Now we're thinking documents. That is data. Right? That is awesome. Now, think about a couple different things. We have the documentation, we have the policies and procedures. We also have the ability of measuring what we're doing, connecting that back to the member experience, and then building a beautiful loop that allows us to improve and do more. At the end of the day, a gorgeous, fabulous credit union industry is built on mission-based financial institution, right? And what is that mission? That mission is to help credit. And what's so amazing right now, as we are recording here in whichever day it is of the federal shutdown, credit unions are stepping in and creating beautiful ways for those who are impacted by the federal shutdown to continue to have financial liquidity, right? To be able to have paychecks that are coming in. They are stepping up and stepping forward. So to be able to have the ability to do that quickly and to do more of it, you need to have your data and you need to have your AI tool. All right, so I unpacked that. Please, Saroop, explain now how all that comes together.
I think that's exactly right. I think that but I will reframe it a little bit, right? When I think about like LLMs, when I think about like agents, just like humans, they need context, and context is just data. As humans, we need to understand what we're getting ourselves into when we go into a situation. When presenting on stage, it's better to have context than without when you go on this podcast, it's better to have context. Just like that, the more context an AI agent has, the better it's going to perform, right? And so, like, context is data. Context is structured data in your core systems, the data that, credit unions really as the root of their business in understanding their members. Context, as you mentioned, is also, the unstructured data that lives in your, fragmented knowledge bases, your call transcripts, your chat transcripts. And that's the data set that is very new to the landscape of any organization in addition to credit unions. I like to say to credit unions, with core data, you're only looking at one half of the whole picture, because now you can unlock value and structure out of all of the data that's trapped into fragmented systems, unify that, combine that and mesh that with your structured core data. And all of a sudden, you have full context that you can feed into an agent in a workflow to perform a task, right? And when an agent performs a task in a system and it's connected to that workflow and it produces an output that performs a task, you gain a piece of feedback. Did it work or did it not work? That's a binary result, and these are probabilistic machines. So a lot of the times the outcomes are probabilistic, right? But whether it's binary or probabilistic, you can kind of classify that as a good outcome or a bad outcome. And then you can go through the cycle of improvement, right? Over and over and over again. And, that's the magic of this, right? Like, you can continuously make the input into an agent's context window or a multi-agent system's context windows better over time. And that's essentially the control system that every credit union or every organization is trying to achieve and get to.
Saroop, 15 years ago, credit unions were hit with a sales pitch that there was this magic tool called Hadoop that would take unstructured data. You'd throw your unstructured data in, finally you'd get to use all that data. It didn't work for most credit unions. I don't know why, but what I heard was the data was dirtier than the Hadoop salespeople thought it would be, but I don't know why. Can AI digest that data? And these were intelligent, good technical people selling this solution. It really just didn't work in most cases. So if I shovel all my unstructured data into AI, will AI puke it back at me, or will it digest it?
15 years ago, the promise of natural language processing was always known, and there was some rudimentary algorithms that enabled that. It was just very expensive. Latency was extremely high. And frankly, we didn't have the transformer architecture, right? Which emerged in 2017 and then sort of made its way to the launch of ChatGPT, and kind of almost 3 years later, brought us to where we are today. November 30th, 2025 will be 3 years on the dot since ChatGPT launched. But the transformer architecture really changed the ability to kind of reduce the cost of natural language processing, right? So while, systems of the past were able to really, leverage natural language processing, and this has gone through an evolution, it was just way too expensive. It was way too slow. And frankly, it didn't have the capabilities that the transformer architecture does, which is the latest innovation from really kind of like just bringing like AI from a stage of a pre-transformer to post-transformer. And now we're building reasoning capabilities and all sorts of capabilities on top of that, which is changing the landscape of the algorithmic improvements, which continue to make this less expensive, faster, and more performant over time. So I think it's just like it was possible, Robert, but like it was just, again, it just didn't make sense from a cost, a speed, a performance perspective back then.
And for the record, Transformer comes out of Google, which chose to make it essentially public with no profits going to Google. And and in the rush to embrace ChatGPT, people forget that Google gave us the keys to this thing and said, run with it. And ChatGPT's done a better job running with it than Google has so far.
Yeah, I mean, like the culture of Google is one in which it's a very research-driven culture, right? And flowers bloom there. You never know which flowers are going to kind of like emerge into something useful, like because there's many flowers that bloom. Most don't bloom. Most get killed. Gmail bloomed. That was a like a side project that bloomed. And the transformer that attention is all you need. That paper. It was, yes, it was published on archive, right? And that thank God that that happened. Thank God it wasn't an organization that wanted to keep that a secret, and they were the only ones to have it. And I just did think even if Google didn't release it, that would have leaked anyways. People churn, people go to other companies, so eventually it would have gotten out. But like it's a good thing that like that knowledge is known publicly so that we are where we are today in that there's a lot of these models being built. There's an open source community, and yes, Google had its challenges in reacting to ChatGPT launching, but 3 years later, I gotta say, like I'm super impressed with Google's ability to really kind of catch up. And seize the moment because I think they're a company that's still going, in my opinion, I still think they're going to be a company that does very, very well moving forward because they have like full vertical stack, everything they need. They got the hardware, they got the talent to produce the best algorithms, and they're constantly doing that. They have the data. Think about YouTube. That in itself is like a massive, massive data set. But they also have like Google Drive and all of their assets, right? Their still search volume is going up. Despite the traditional model of 10 blue links being disrupted, AI mode and AI overviews, it's just like, it's a more rich experience to talk to an LLM. So the amount of questions you can ask is also increasing as well. People are having conversations. It's not just kind of one keyword and you get a link and then you go there. People are having like ongoing conversations about their life with this. I can't believe some of the things that people are telling ChatGPT, right? Yeah, like I mean, it's just the spectrum of what you can converse with these models has opened up a whole new paradigm.
I personally use Google Gemini dramatically more often than I use ChatGPT. I'm just comfortable using it. And it took me a little while to learn not to do Boolean search because Gemini doesn't like Boolean search, whereas the old Google search engine did still kind of like it a little bit. But and I'm not dissing ChatGPT. I have very little experience using it. I primarily use Gemini. So, Anne, what do you say to what Saroop just said?
So a couple things. So first of all, isn't it just a joy to be in a conversation with him because he's just such a good explainer?
Yes, I'd like to get Saroop on that. So when you suggested this, we do this show with you and Saroop, I said, of course. And
Good.
I'm not putting you down, but
No, no,
Saroop
no, no, no. Well, it's just
Saroop takes a very complicated subject matter
yes.
and makes it so I can understand it pretty easily. And I figure most of my listeners can too.
By the
So
way, I didn't know I had the skill set until I started doing these sessions with credit unions in 2023, from the beginning. So I'm happy that, I'm useful for something.
well, and what's fun about that though is again circling back in, I get to have that same translation skills, if you will, with data and credit unions, and so it's such a neat, it's such a wonderful conversation, and it's so easy when Sarup and I get together and nerd out on things. But to the point that he was just talking about, you know, Hadoop was fantastic, but credit unions didn't know specifically what to do with it. There wasn't a strategy. And I think that's still a huge opportunity for credit unions is to look and say, not only what is my AI strategy, but what's the data I have behind it? So almost kind of a combo program of thinking about it as, hey, what are the pain problems I have with my member right now? And how do I want to use my data and connecting up and being able to use AI to help? So taking a couple steps back, I think the big leap that we've been seeing in the last 3 years has been, again, Robert, just what you said, easy to get to it. I can use these tools no matter what I'm doing. Now I have to understand how do they fit within the spectra of the credit union, right? How am I looking at this, not only maybe in small use cases, but how does this fit in as an overall strategy? This is another incredibly powerful tool I have in my toolbox, but it's one of many, and I need to use it in conjunction with that to make it absolutely super impactful. So when I think about credit unions, and I do get this conversation many times, which is, hey, how should I be thinking about AI? And I'm like, let's step back, think about the member first. What are your pain problems? What do you have to do? Now let's start thinking about not only AI, but how are you going to fuel it? And let's make sure we do have a really quick conversation about governance, because that's the big question. People say, well, how do I make sure that this is secure? But also, how am I making sure that the data I get is not dirty? And that goes back to governance. So the other piece I'd want to make sure we definitely tap on today is, hey, how do I think about governing this whole thing without getting too freaky about it? And the most importantly is look back at your security policies, but also now's the time to add in the data management policy. So let's think about that, right? Let's think about, data management truly is how are you going to use data and the life cycle of data to make sure a couple of things are happening. Who has access to it? How are you documenting it? Where does it live? Who else, again, has access to it? But then how are we using that to make policies and procedures? And then how are we making sure we have the right steps, the right access for remediation? All of these pieces, right? So thinking about use case, who has access, documentation, how do we make sure we have policy procedures for remediation so that we can spin this whole beautiful loop, goes right into what are you going to do with AI? Because occasionally you'll grab something, and I know, Saroop, you'll definitely have some insight on this. You'll grab your standard operating procedures and realize, oh my gosh, I gave you the ones from 5 years ago. We've updated, right? So there's a lot of pieces that we have to be mindful for and put them together. And let's not get overwhelming. Let me just let me stop everybody for a hot minute before they go, oh my gosh, I have to field map all my data. No, 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 no. Let's just go use case. Let's just think about, when I'm saying use case, what's the problem you want to solve? Let's start thinking about it by these tiny little use cases, because we're going to string many use cases along, and we're going to be able to clean up our data, manage it better, and get better output as we use AI solutions.
My favorite AI project in credit unions so far that I know about is the one Saroop did with One Nevada, which on the one hand kind of sounds pedestrian. On the other hand, it's elegant, it's beautiful. It's you throw in a bunch of member-facing customer service rep documents, the stuff they're supposed to consult when answering members. And, well, they contradict each other, they're mistakes, blah, blah, blah. So you keep stirring this pot with AI, and you come up with this nice, elegant thing where the member-facing rep can quickly get an answer. It's accurate. And you just do it, man. It's something that took 10 minutes, now it takes a minute. It's elegant. Did I sum that up more or less accurately, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at a high level, I'll break this down a little bit. But like the way that SharePoint and Google Drive and all these like knowledge management systems were built of the past. There's files and folders, right? And most of those files are PDFs. And version control was always an issue. Version controlling wasn't systemized. It was like a bunch of documents scattered. And so the state of the world prior to kind of like LLMs and these knowledge management systems that rely on having context, there's a big step that needs to be taken from turning your static knowledge in fragmented systems, like literally scattered across fragmented systems, including your call transcripts and context on the voice of your member, right? All of that needs to kind of like just be available in a context layer that's standardized and speaks in the language of agents. Agents don't speak in static PDFs. They can read them, but they do much better with like an output that is structured in a JSON format, and like really kind of like just perfecting that context layer. You'll get much more meaningful output. Right. So that's the first thing that, we did with Steve and Gary at Truestone and Michelle at Suffolk and many others. Right. That's the first step, like that credit unions really need to take.
Wait. So Suffolk, Michelle Dean?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, so she did this.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, no,
I got to get her on this show to talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
for sure. I mean, they have a good story around their core conversion related to using this unified context layer is kind of what I call it, right? But once you have that context layer in its perfect state, right, and constantly maintained, because there are back office teams that now manage this loop that we've created. There's four steps to the loop. One is you got to evaluate the conversation. If it's a search and you're getting a response or a conversation, like it could be like a call transcript, you need to evaluate the conversation. That's step one. We call that an eval, right? Step two is you got to attribute that to the source. You got to say what citations, what documents were used to produce that answer. Okay, that's step two, right? Step three is once you identify the problems, the gaps, the conflicts, etc., you have to remediate, right? And you can auto remediate, but usually in the credit union space, there's a back office staff that's like human in the loop that's making those adjustments and changes, but they're just monitoring for inconsistencies, right? They're not blind anymore. And then it's tracking the improvement. And our response quality score enables you to go through the cycle to ensure that your documents are at 90% plus. I'm proud to say that all our credit unions combined as of today are at 91% response quality, which means there's 9% gaps that exist out there, conflicts, version control issues, et cetera. On average, these credit unions started at a 30% response quality. So being able to measure that improvement is the fourth step. And once you go through that cycle over and over again, in Anne's articulate words on, one of our last podcasts, we've created a learning engine. And what can you do on top of that learning engine? We're only starting to imagine those possibilities.
Well, you just made an excellent point, Saroop, which is you make many excellent points, but I'll comment on this one. You hear, oh, AI makes mistakes. Yes, it does. At least once a week, I see a pretty glaring mistake in Google's Gemini. Human beings make more mistakes, in my opinion. We've gotten more erroneous information from customer service reps in phone calls than Gemini has ever fed me. And I'm not saying human beings are bad. It's just, mistakes happen. It's not the end of the world. It's not, oh, we can't use AI because the machine makes mistakes. So, and when you're out talking with credit unions about projects, et cetera, now I hear this from other tech vendors who aren't selling AI, that the credit unions say, hey, man, I ain't got no time to talk to you. I'm focused on this AI thing. Get out of here. Come back in 6 months. Talk to me. Are you hearing that?
I'm hearing a huge pivot to AI. And I think again, being in the industry this is my third decade. It's been interesting to hear how you've heard similar types of focus points, right? Um, I mean, gosh, you could go all the way back to, and I'm just I hate to take it, but it's a pretty easy one, mobile banking, right? Oh my goodness, we're going to be able to have mobile banking. I can't think of anything else because it's going to just suck all of my energy and all of my members, and everybody's going to want it. And it's just going to be this incredible, all I'm going to do is this one piece. No, mobile banking is just one of many different tools, right? Your members are going to interact using ATMs, using your call center, using the branch, using, mobile. Likewise with AI, I think what is interesting about the focus here is the fact that there is a huge fear of being left behind. If I don't do
Yes.
this, somebody else is going to come get it. And the part that I want credit unions absolutely to focus on is, hey, 100% jump into this technology, because just what Saroop said, it is affordable and you can get into it. There's not these huge technological obstacles that there are with other technologies that have been brought into the credit union space. But please use it to show return. So make sure that whatever you're doing, it is connected to your strategic plan, which is traditionally going to be connected right back to the member experience. So please make sure that as you're doing it, pick very simple, again, like anything else. I was just giving a presentation on how to start with AI. And literally I was like, do not be building a rocket ship because you don't actually have any of the tools to do that. Could you please just build a bike that moves faster? You know how to build bikes. Let's just make this bike move faster. Let's just start with what you know, be comfortable with it, using the material you have, putting the bumpers around it so you feel comfortable with the security. Build both capability and confidence at the same time, very, very, very small. Everybody says, well, like you had mentioned, Robert, well, sometimes it feels very pedestrian. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. This is not a one-stop pony here. You're actually have a huge fleet that is always learning. As Saroop was just saying, this is a learning engine. This is actually the opportunity that the credit union gets to be truly a learning machine. And now you can take it and you can build upon what you're doing. It's not isolated and exclusive. So when I get credit unions to talk about that, I say, no, let's just take a couple steps back. What do you want it to do? Who do you want to have in the room? How do you want to be managing this? Let's start with your strategy first, and then let's start building this out.
Well, I also tell credit unions that if they talk to their peers, they'll find most of them aren't really doing a heck of a lot of interesting stuff in AI. However, JP Morgan Chase is, Bank of America is, etc. Those guys are going to get such astounding operational efficiencies out of AI tools. And they're already more efficient than credit unions to begin with. They're going to increase the margin of efficiency. And that makes them almost lethally dangerous to credit unions. So you got to get on this ship, man. You got to get on it, no matter what you think.
Right, but get on it and do it with the ways that you can. Because remember, you're talking economies of scale here.
Oh yeah, I've talked to credit unions in the past, like a year or so ago. Oh, we're going to use this for sales, member sales. It's going to fail. It's failing at most companies that are trying that. There are projects like Saroops that deliver tangible, real values, and that's what I would start with.
Exactly. That impact the member experience. Let's go all.
Yes, absolutely. The member at One Nevada has a much better experience out of this. Yeah. And also the employees at One Nevada have much better experiences. They must be frustrating to spend 10 minutes looking for an answer to a question, finding 3 different answers in the files that are different.
Yes.
I mean, this would drive me nuts. I would just hang up and say, I'm going home.
Right. So that's what's so powerful about this is when you do start small, you get very quick return on investment with the impact you have on the member, but also the impact that you have on staff. I mean, Saroop, do you want to highlight some of the returns? I mean, One Nevada's had some amazing returns, and so is Truestone.
Yeah, I mean, like similar stories from all of them, and it's so amazing to work with credit unions because, like, we go on these monthly webinars, and everybody sort of shares like their experiences, and everybody's learning from each other. There's multiple beneficiaries of tying together this front office, back office workflow, and essentially the gap that we saw at the beginning was that back office is maintaining these policies and procedures, but they don't have the context necessary to make updates to those documents or identify when those documents need to be up to date. That was number one problem. And that caused the problem of course, if you're an MSR in branch or call center and you don't have updated documentation, even if it's stuck in SharePoint, you're still going to need to make a back office call, right? Even if the information is updated, in many cases it's not. There's version control issues. Like if there's 2 documents, the MSR is like, which one's correct, right? So it's not always their fault, right? But a newly trained person may not even know where to find those documents. So their back office calls are occurring, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, like the problem from frontline and the wait times that occurred to the member, 15-minute hold times calling back office. And like, if enough MSRs are calling back office, like, there's a backlog because there's only a few back office individuals that can field those questions. You got to call someone that has that domain expertise. The biggest problem that exists in the enterprise that hasn't created a unified context layer is, where does most knowledge exist in a credit union or any given enterprise? In people's heads, right? And that knowledge is not systemized. So every search that happens, every call transcript that happens, all of a sudden what you're doing is you're creating organizational context, organizational memory, right? So if someone, a staff member, retires, for example, that yes, they take the knowledge with them in their heads, but it also remains in the system, accessible, unified, perfected, and available to everybody in the organization forever, evermore, right? Like agents are going to be able to parse through all of this historical memory and be able to leverage that for future gains, because every piece of context that you're collecting, including a search, including a call transcript, including all of this, contributes to organizational context that can be used by agents in the future. And that's constantly improving. So all of a sudden, you've gone from fragmented systems with static PDFs to a system that is a learning engine that, information is actually just living and breathing, I like to call it, right? And once you have a living and breathing organism with the right models, and these models are constantly improving, you're obviously going to get better results. Getting there is difficult, right? Like it takes time, but if you put the investment in, like Truestone has, like Suffolk has, like Arrowhead has, like One Nevada has, you will gain tremendous benefits out of that. And again, we don't know everything that exists on top of these learning engines and what's possible, but we're only starting to realize that.
Now, what will the impact on staffing be of AI? And I know One Nevada does not. I've talked to Steve O'Donnell enough. They do not reduce staff. They're very patient people. They just wait for the staff to winnow down over a year or three. And
that's just a credit union thing, right? Like
right. And no, I congratulate Steve on that. I'm not challenging him at all. JP Morgan would just issue pink slips and be done with it. It's
I'd argue that, I think credit unions have the right mentality where it's like, those that go to lay off all of their staff because there's a cost efficiency to it may be missing the bigger picture. Because it's essentially like, unless you're totally opposed to using the tools, right? Like if you're totally opposed to it, like that's the exception. But if you are willing to adapt and like level up on top of like, what became automated in the past, there's no limit to the productivity you can gain because growth is limitless, right? And the example of this is like, we ingest like millions and millions of call minutes across like credit unions anonymously, right? And, in the past, right, like historically, our customers used to have human salaried workers logging calls, meaning that they would like spot check calls, member facing calls, and they would like log them. Guess what? A team of five, getting paid like, 70, 100 grand a year could only analyze about 1% of calls, right? All of a sudden, when you can get a fleet of AI agents, we call it Echo, to analyze 100% of calls in seconds, and that improves over time, what happens to those five salaried workers? They're not going to go away because now they have context to identify all of the issues and opportunities that are happening on those calls fed up to them in real time, and being able to kind of leverage that information to create operational change, right? And we've seen many instances of that.
Now, when do we eliminate the person in the credit union and the machine actually fields the call and answers the call? I can give you an example. Eltropy has introduced a collections product that, and I asked them, I said, okay, I want to do something about this. They set up a show for me where the only participant on the show was an executive in a Virginia credit union in charge of it. They did not have an Eltropy tech person on the call. And she's raving about this. And I said, what does the staff like about this? She said, well, many of them have moved out of collections and they're really happy to be out of it.
There you go.
It's because they were finding, they were making calls and rarely when they were answered, the person would curse at them and hang up. It's like, wow, I don't have to listen to that garbage anymore. Now, that credit union did not reduce staff. They did find other jobs for people.
And think about it, Robert, for a second. As a credit union, your whole job is, really, your focus is all around the member. And credit unions love to say that one of their points of differentiation is service. Now, it's very difficult to quantify and qualify that, but that's one of their things. So everybody in that organization is like, I want to serve the member. And if I can do that better and faster, I'm going to feel better about it. And in many cases, hey, I didn't want to have to do that repetitive task. I actually want to do something a little bit different and a little more powerful. So you're beginning to see credit unions think about staffing differently and also be thinking about, hey, if this particular part of my workforce has 10, 15, 20% more space, where else would they like to have that being used, right? Is it going to be more in the complex pieces? Is it going to be more in learning other aspects? Is it to be able to cross-pollinate across the organization? It really also has this beautiful cross-pollination opportunity that credit unions kind of have been doing very informally, but allows them to formalize it.
Saroop, what do you say to that?
Totally agree. Yeah. 100%. Like, like as I said, if you have context available and accessible at all times, all of a sudden, like the things that, were impossible to be revealed in the past are now possible. And, an example of this, like we're categorizing all these calls into very, very granular buckets. If you look at the calls like as a whole, like, let's say 10,000 calls a month, if you look at it as a whole, you're not going to be able to identify problems. But the minute you're able to kind of categorize things, okay, this was a lending call related to HELOCs. And, for some reason, there's a subset of these calls that has a high wait time and a very low resolution rate. The question is why, right? Being able to kind of like just extract out those call transcripts, just those ones, and basically just have an agent develop an analysis of the reasons why issues are occurring, high wait times, et cetera. All of a sudden you realize that, wow, documentation is out of date, or this is an issue, or there's this process that's broken, or the agent's doing something that is a bit inefficient that they should adjust their habits, or we're routing to the wrong MSR. We should route to the other one with more domain expertise, right? All of a sudden those insights start to become available and you can drive change.
Do most credit unions attempt to route calls to an MSR with expertise in the call? Is that normal, or is it just random assignment?
Call center systems do have call routing capabilities, but I think that up until to date, the insight was lacking on where you should route the call to. But because again, you have organizational context and memory on every call that's occurred and which agents are performing positively and negatively and resolving and not resolving across very granular subsets of calls, you can start to say, hey, well, for HELOC calls, we should really route to this subset of agents and not these subset of agents. We should train those agents. Maybe we'll roll out a voice AI agent like from Eltropy, and like A/B test that against a human agent, not for the reason we want to remove that human agent from operations, but because we want to elevate them to a tier 2 or a tier 3 task, right? Elevation is the goal, and automation like leads to elevation, like the collections example that you had mentioned before.
So, Anne, you see a continuing role for big data, obviously.
Yes. And part of this is thinking about, let's just take what Saroop just landed on, which is, hey, we're actually going to be able to make change. So let's now take data and AI and think about, what does a credit union do with that? Well, one of the biggest challenges credit unions have is, how do I systematically formalize innovation? This allows that. Okay, so what does that exactly mean? I can now do more with less. I can now improve members' lives much more, and I can start making change. For example, right now, one of the tools that credit unions have that kind of gets overlooked is the skip a payment. Larger financial institutions are not going to offer skip a pay. That is already set up as a loan tool. That's already set up in policies. That's already set up. How could I start thinking about how cash flow works with maybe a subsect of my members and help them take maybe an issue right now, government shutdown? How could I immediately automate that so that it works and that they're in a better financial situation than maybe where they started? And that is just one kind of like, how could I reuse an existing tool differently? That is one example of innovation. And how do I have an operational system? How do I take information, knowledge, solutions, and how do I put that together to do what? To scale and to do things differently. So there's this beautiful piece, and that's one of the things that we work with is how do we get you to systematically innovate using your data, using your solutions, using AI, using the whole context. And that's where it goes. That's how we bring in all these threads. This is truly the play that credit unions have now, is they've been doing absolute innovation from day one, but now how do we do it so it's absolutely impactful and allows them to scale?
Saroop, how big are the smallest credit unions that you're dealing with?
100 million in assets.
Oh, that's small.
100 million in assets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, we work with a number of them that are under a billion in assets, and like, of course, the playing field is different than the bigger ones. In the smaller organizations, sometimes there are operational gaps in being able to even, you know, maintain your knowledge base, right? So there's definitely different challenges with smaller organizations than larger organizations, but like, again, those put in the effort to actually get their knowledge engine to a state where it's contextual and available. They start reaping the benefits, because again, there's no limit to the amount that you can grow, right? And you're only limited by the pace in which you're able to move and the information available to you, right? This is like financial services is an information rich business. Like, we're selling information products. We're not selling really physical products, right? So information products really rely on having the best context, and the faster you can keep that context up to date, the better, right? And that's the problem that is being solved here. But you got to kind of put in the base work, and sometimes, like, smaller organizations like have to kind of build out the infrastructure necessary to maintain that.
And I'll ask you the same question. What are the smallest credit unions that you're talking about big data
Oh,
with?
absolutely. We've created a whole small credit union cohort where one of the advantages with, and I mean, we're talking
They all have big data.
right,
Even a tiny credit union has some big data. It might
right.
not know it has it, but it has it.
Can't unlock it. And so we actually have a neat little format where not only do we teach the smaller credit unions, hey, what's an easy way? What's a file you can pull? How can you do this? But we actually set them up so that becomes part of their workflow so that they know I can do this. And then on top of it, we attach up, all right, how do you take action on the insights you have? So it's truly data activation. But the magic sauce is with some of the smaller credit unions, and we're talking like, 100 is that 100 million assets, is that they all work beautifully together in a cohort. So they need their own cohort to learn off each other and to continue that. So we've worked with credit unions. We've had about 10 of them in the room. And one of the neatest things was they were able to take insights they had, access them, activate on them, pull out a credit card offering, and within 6 weeks get 30,000 new balances on new cards. That's
Wow.
exactly what credit unions can do. Exactly. So it does not matter. We can help you move forward. It does not happen. You do not need to have, you just have to have desire.
Anything either of you wants to add to this? I think we've covered a lot here.
I would love to end on kind of the note that Saroop and I were having a conversation a couple weeks ago, and it's about
And the idea for this show is Ann Legg's. It's not mine. If you don't like it, blame her. But if
yeah,
nothing else, it proves that I do listen to people's suggestions. For those who
of
say I
course
don't,
you do.
it's wrong.
Of course you do. But let me summarize this. Saroop had mentioned up a really neat concept, and I love it, and that is thinking about this world with abundance. And credit unions always come into the world of how can I help you, member? And now we get to think about how can we truly have some substantial impact. I mean, we save the member money because they use the credit union space. There's a lot of things, but we could really now be thinking about how do we help members achieve abundance? Does that mean they get off of payday lending? Does that get the cycle of debt? Do they finally get to say, this is what is my financial dream and I wanted it? And they can now, and maybe that dream is homeownership or education or retirement, whatever that financial dream is, credit unions now can lean into that. So as I like to think about this, I want to kind of tie an abundance wrapper, if I will, or bow around that. And I got to tip that off. That was Saroop. You were the one who were like, let's think about it this way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, I think of like, if, in maybe like 5 years, humanoid robots are going to start rolling out into the real world. They already are in factories, and they're pretty impressive. 10 years from now, like, if the cost of labor goes down significantly across, like, billions of people, if the productivity gains we get for AI agents in our workflow starts to elevate people and enable organizations to grow faster, become more profitable, become more margin efficient, right? And that's just two examples out of like many, many examples that are being operationalized today in the world, both physical AI and real world AI, physical AI, and like software layer AI that we're focused on, right? It's like if the cost of labor plummets, right? It's only a matter of like our decisions in terms of how we want to kind of like benefit the world, right? And like, the worry is like the rich are going to get richer, and everybody else is going to be left out. But I don't think that's going to happen. I actually think that the people driving the narrative around these conversations really kind of like just speak about an abundant future where you don't have to work 5, 6 days a week. You can work like 3 days a week, right? And it's your choice whether you want to work or not, right? You'll still get paid, right? But if you don't want to work, you don't have to work. You can pursue creative activities. You'll still be taken care of, right? I think the future looks like that if we continue to go down this path, right? The path that we're currently on.
Tim Ferriss's first big selling book, 4 Hour Work Week.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
maybe we're heading in that direction. Before we go, think hard about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really, really, really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Robert McGarvey again. That's rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU 2.0 podcast.